Hello, and welcome to another 12-port product overview video. In this video, I'll introduce MFA before privileged access, which is a key element of the PAM functionality in 12-port. The platform supports many modes of remote access, spanning a wide range of destination operating systems and protocols like SSH and RDP, and you can secure all of these access types behind MFA challenges. We'll explore exactly how this works in two parts. First, I'll demonstrate the experience of MFA before privileged access from the perspective of a PAM user. Then, we'll look at how a PAM administrator can use the various MFA configuration options to customize the MFA requirements of the system. So, to begin, I'm logging into a lower privileged PAM user account, and in standard fashion, I'm going to be challenged for MFA right here. You'll notice that this particular account authenticates with TOTP, but you'll see later that many additional MFA types are supported. So we've logged into the 12-port console, and we're going to launch a few remote sessions to see some more instances of MFA. To do that, I'll open the asset database, and I'm going to navigate to a specific asset. We'll use Windows Server for the demo here. I open up the asset view, and I'll click Access up here to launch a privilege session. Since my 12-port account is required to authenticate before launching a session into this asset, you'll see that I'm challenged for MFA once again. I'll enter the TOTP code as before, and now that I'm authenticated, I can continue past the launcher and enter the RDP session. So we just saw MFA before web-based privileged access, but it's also possible to set up an MFA requirement for remote access via the 12-port proxy as well. You'll see what that looks like here. I'm using the native Windows RDP client to launch a session into that same Windows Server asset. And before the proxy forwards my RDP connection to the destination asset, I'm challenged for MFA once again. Once I enter my TOTP code, I can proceed with the privilege session. It's important to note that since the MFA prompt screen is generated by the 12-port proxy rather than the destination Windows server, this functionality is possible without installing any agents. Now, I've switched to a PAM administrator account to explore some of the MFA configuration options. The MFA requirements of the PAM system are actually set up in a few different places. So we'll start by looking at the access profiles. Access profiles are responsible for controlling how different users and groups are allowed to connect to different assets. They can do some interesting things, like allow or deny various actions inside a privileged session and control what's recorded in the session audit trail. But the relevance of the access profiles to this topic is that they determine whether MFA is required to access an asset. These profiles can be assigned on a very granular per user or per asset basis, so you have a high degree of control over the MFA policy in your PAM system. The other piece of the setup is the MFA rules right here. This is where various types of MFA can be assigned to different users and groups. We can see what that looks like if I add a new rule. First, I'm able to choose a user or group either from the built-in local directory or some other integrated identity provider. We can create a rule for the technicians group, for example. I can then choose from any MFA type that's been configured in the system. And you can see from the list here that we have very broad support. I'm able to select from Duo Security, Radius, YubiKey, Mail MFA, or TOTP. This controls which MFA type users in this group will use to authenticate when logging in or launching a privileged session. The final element here is Intelligent MFA. Now, you may have noticed during the initial demonstration you saw earlier that we were challenged for MFA 3 separate times in a very short window. Now, of course, it's important to use MFA to protect high security priority assets, but in some cases the frequency of the challenges can be excessive, which creates MFA fatigue. To remedy this, Intelligent MFA allows you to define a grace period. This way, if a user performs multiple actions that require MFA in quick succession, they won't be challenged every time. For instance, if the user logs into the 12-port console and gets challenged for MFA in doing so, and then immediately launches a privileged session, they won't have to authenticate again since they'll still be in the grace period. Now, in addition, you can define this maximum frequency to prevent the grace period from being exploited. The value you set here controls the number of times the user can log in or perform some other MFA protected action before the grace period is ignored and the user is challenged once again normally. So that brings us to the end of this demonstration, and hopefully you have a clearer understanding of how you can customize your own MFA policy in 12-port to protect privileged remote sessions in your network. If you want to learn more about other facets of the 12-port platform, you can check out the other videos in the 12-port overview series, or refer to our public documentation at docs.12port.com. Thanks for watching.